Hey everyone, it's Ms. Lopez. In this activity, we are going to use SEM bars to help us see if there is a difference between students who complete the assigned reading guides versus those who don't. Let's get started. So some background information about your reading guides. They are not required to be turned in for a grade. Turning them in is optional. And what we've done over the past few years is we keep track of who turns them in and how they do on the quizzes that are assigned from the reading. So normally you would have 2 weeks to complete a reading guide. And at the end of those 2 weeks, you would turn that reading guide in. We can look over it. You guys can ask us questions as we move along in the unit, but we wanted to see, is it actually worth it for our students to go through the trouble of completing those reading guides? And so for the past 6 years, we've been keeping track of this information, and we're going to share that with you now and use SEM bars to help us see if there is an actual statistical difference between students who do complete and turn in the reading guide versus those who don't turn in the reading guide. So to do that, we're going to need some data, and the data is going to be the average of these quizzes based on the reading. Now, quizzes are normally 50 points. So the data that we're going to give you is the number of points that the students got out of 50. Starting with the students who did the reading guide, their average was a 43.9. And the students who didn't do the reading guide averaged 39 flat. Now, right off the bat, that looks like there is a difference in the data. But again, we're going to use our SEM bars to help us see, is there really truly a difference? Where does the true average for those students who completed the reading guide, where does that lie? And then where's the true average for the students who didn't do the reading guide? So in order to do that, you need to know what the SEM is, and the SEM will always be calculated or given to you in like a data table. You will not be asked to calculate the SEM. So we have 0.04 for the students who did the reading guide and 0.4 for the students who did the reading guide, 0.9 for the students who didn't do the reading guide. Now we're going to take this data and we're going to apply it to our graph. So remember, when you're doing these graphs, like on question number 2, SAD, S-A-D, scale, axes, and data. So I'm going to start off here by scaling. I'm going to go 0, and then I'm going to have a break in this chart because the number that I need to go up to is 40. 45 is probably the max, and I know that there's 20 squares on these types of grids that College Board gives you. So I'm going to need to skip some to make sure that I can use as much of this as possible. Looks like the lower extreme will be somewhere in the 38 range. So it looks like I'm going to have to go as low as somewhere in 38, as high as 45. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and put a mark here. This is my 38. Okay, because I went from 0 and there's a break, and now I'm going to start there at the 38. And I think what I will do is I will go, each tick mark is half a point or half a value. So if we go to 38, then this is 38.5, then this would be 39, 39.5, this would be 40, 40.5, 41, 41.5, 42, 42.5, 43, 43.5, 44, 44.5, 45, and then this top one would be 46. And remember, if you end up scaling this wrong, if you end up doing something bad or just not doing it correctly, you can also scratch this out and use this side of your axis if you make a terrible, terrible mistake. So that is the scale. Now we're going to go with A for axes, labeling. This is the quiz average. And then down here, this is going to be the 2 groups of students that I'm comparing. So I'm just going to call the students who did the reading guide, I'm just going to call those RG. And the students who didn't do the reading guide, I'm just going to put them as N, no RG. So no reading guide turned in. Okay, now we're going to go in and do our bar graphs, and we're going to add our SEM. But for me, I think it's easier if we start by doing just the bar graphs first. So I'm going to come over here to the students who did the reading guide. I'm going to go up to 43.9. So let's see, this is 43 and a half. So really close to the 44, I'm gonna draw my bar graph for those students at 43.9. And now I'm gonna do the students who didn't do the reading guide and they're at 39. So let's go ahead and draw those folks. There we go. Now, we're gonna add the SEM bars. And to add your SEM bars, you need to figure out how tall and how far down those SEM bars are going to be. To do that, you take your average and you add to get the top of your SEM bar, and then you subtract to get the bottom of that SEM bar. So from 43.9, I'm going to add 0.4, 43.9 plus 0.4 gets me to 44.3. And now I'm going to add that to this SEM bar. So 44.3 is probably somewhere, I would say about right here. And then I'm going to go down. Now, that line looks a little crooked. It's a little shaky. I'm really worried about whether or not they're going to interpret that correctly. So to make sure that it's understood how high up that line goes, I'm going to write 44.3. And now there's no doubt in the reader's mind how high up that bar was meant to go. So now to get the bottom of the SEM bar, I'm going to take 43.9 and I'm going to subtract 0.4, and that gets me 43.5. So that's going to be this line right here. And again, I'm going to write 43.5 as my data point. Now, students who didn't do the reading guide, let's figure out what they were at. So to get the top of that bar, I'm going to go from 39 plus 0.9, and that comes out to 39.9, so that's going to be really close to the 40 mark. So this is 39.9. And now to get the bottom of that value, I'm going to take 39 minus 0.9, and I get 38.1. That's going to be about down to here. 38.1. Okay, so now I've got my data represented. I drew the bar graphs, I drew my averages, and I included the SEM. Using the class data, graph the two groups of students, which we did, those who did the reading guide, those who did not. In the line spaces below, write an appropriate conclusion to the data. So when you're writing your conclusion, what I'm looking for on the rubrics is, did you talk about a statistical difference? And then did you back that up by talking about the SEM bars to support your conclusion? So on a graph like this, the conclusion would sound something like this. There is a statistical difference between students who did the reading guide and those who didn't. Okay, so there is a statistical difference between those who did the reading guide and those who didn't do it. Okay, and then, so that's one part of it. The other point's going to come from, how do you know it's a statistical difference? And the way that you know that, or the way that you back that claim up, is talking about the SEM bars. And so you can simply write, I know this because the SEM bars do not overlap, period. So again, it wasn't required, just like it's not required for you. But if you want a better grade in this class, and if you want to understand the material more, that reading guide and completing it will help you out statistically more than if you don't complete the reading guide. I really hope this video was helpful to you guys. Thanks so much for watching.